project, just to talk a little bit about the physical property. This is a picture of the property we're talking about, Studios on Montero. This is just east of 101 on the north end of Petaluma. And up until recently, it was reoperated as a motel. There's actually two buildings. You can't see the second one. There's two buildings, similar to this. This is a 50-year-old, roughly 50-year-old motel building. And again, it was operational until a few months ago when we acquired it. So let's keep going through the slides. So I'm up first. My name's up on the screen. I'm the special projects manager for Burbank Housing, and my colleagues Ashlyn, Julia, and Jameson will be talking after me. So I alluded to that a minute ago. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So again, this is a conversion of a 50-year-old motel. When we're done, we'll end up with 60 units of permanent supported housing, which is housing for homeless folks. And there's several hundred of these kind of projects happening around the state. The state of California unrolled a new funding source a couple of years ago called Home Key. I think it was called Door Key initially, but anyway, it's called Home Key now, and there's 235 sites, at least that many in the state right now, and about a half a dozen or so of those are in this county. Most of the Home Keys projects, like Studios at Montero, are motel conversions, but there are some exceptions. There's some of those sources are going to other kinds of homeless facilities, but by and large, we're looking at motel hotel conversions. When we get this done, and we're under construction now, when this is completed, we'll have a fenced community with controlled entrances, and there'll be on-site staffing and private security consisting of the Burbank staff, our property management staff from Burbank Housing, and COTS staff will be service providers. And then when there's neither one of those staff people on site, we'll have paid security. So there'll be always staff. The funding for the project, the big one here is the state of California. I mentioned the Home Key program, relatively new, putting in $15.1 million into this project out of a total budget of $18.3 million. And then other funders include Providence Health at $1.5 million, City of Petaluma, $1.1 million, the County of Sonoma, $600,000, and Wells Fargo Foundation made a $25,000 gift to us just for furnishings for the homeless people that will be moving in. I mentioned a minute ago, it's under construction. It's been under construction about 2 months now, and we're looking at opening in April of next year. Next slide, please. These, oops, there we go. These studio apartments are what you would expect from a 50-year-old motel. They're quite small, 207 square feet. We'll be adding small kitchenettes into each of them. So they'll have a cooktop, and a microwave and a little sink in addition to the bathroom, which is already there, of course. And we'll have air conditioning and heating units, motel style, and we'll be offering high-speed internet for all the tenants. We'll have an on-site laundry room, which we'll keep as inexpensive as we can and still pay the bills for the laundry vendor. Those machines are typically leased to a third party. We typically lease those from a third party. So we'll keep the laundry costs as low as we possibly can. There's quite a bit of parking already in this site as a former motel, and we'll convert some of the vehicle parking to bicycle parking. And mentioned a minute ago, we'll have the office staffed and the property supervised 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we'll have an on-site Burbank staff person, a property manager, potentially a maintenance person, but there'll be somebody on site all the time who's a Burbank management employee. The property currently has a lobby, of course, because it was an operational motel, and we'll convert that lobby and office space into a community room with some computer stations and private counseling rooms. And then in terms of the neighborhood, you can see from this slide, it's close to the Petaluma Health Center. It's close to a lot of retail and restaurants and stores. Pretty easy access to public transportation, and Highway 101 is right in front of the building. And the Petaluma Peer Recovery Center is just 2 blocks away. Next slide, please. I think this is my cue to hand this off to Ashlyn. So thank you all for your attention. And if you have questions, we'll get to those after we get through the slides. So Ashlyn, I think you're up.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashlyn Artis, and I'm the Permanent Supportive Housing Manager for Studios at Montero. And I'll just be going over some key points of what permanent supportive housing is. Permanent supportive housing is service-enhanced housing in a safe environment that encourages independence and promotes community integration and support, recovery, and wellness. It's affordable housing for individuals experiencing homeless with low barriers for entry. And what we mean by low barriers, that means the requirements to enter are limited or minimal, or their minimal expectations are placed on the people that wish to live at Studios at Montero. One of the good things about Studios at Montero, sometimes permanent supportive housing can get confused with Section 8 housing or voucher housing. And while they do both have subsidies, Studios at Montero does have support services built in to promote housing stability. So we do, like Mark had mentioned, we do have COTS staffing who will be on site to provide support to individuals that are housed at Studios at Montero. And as mentioned, this housing is specifically designed for the most vulnerable, chronically homeless population. Next slide, please. With Studios at Montero, how property management comes in is that we provide property management services, meaning we review the lease with each individual that will be living there. We also enforce the lease, and we make sure that each person prior to signing the lease understand what their responsibilities and what their rights and what the terms are of the lease before signing it. We also collaborate with support services, COTS, to ensure that each person understands what is in the lease and understands what their role is as a tenant. We provide a comprehensive lease as well as community guidelines to each tenant to assist them in maintaining housing long-term. So our common goal with COTS is that we are ensuring that people are staying housed and they're not transitioning back to homelessness. We do assist residents in understanding their rights and responsibilities as they are outlined with HUD's tenant rights and responsibilities as well.
Okay, thanks, Ashlyn. Hi, I'm Julia Gaines, the real Julia Gaines. I see there's a few others joining us today. You can tell who sent out the link to everybody. It's great that you're here with us today. I'm the Senior Supportive Programs Manager for COTS. I'll also be supervising the Supportive Services Program at the Studios of Montero. And I'll go into a little bit more about the tenants that we're going to serve and the supportive services we're going to offer them. So the project accepts tenant referrals from the coordinated entry system. For those of you that don't know, this is a database of unsheltered folks seeking housing in Sonoma County. The clients in this database have been assessed by homeless service providers. They've been given a score based on vulnerability factors such as age, health, and mobility. And then so they're being referred by coordinated entry. This is the only way that tenants can apply for the Studios at Montero. SAM, as we call Studios of Montero, receives 3 types of referrals. This is adult individuals, transitional age youth, or TAY. These are young adults between ages 18 to 24, and then families of 2, which is 1 parent with 1 minor child. Due to the units being, studio size apartments, we can't accommodate families any larger than this. In order to be eligible for a SAM unit, referred clients must be chronically homeless, as mentioned. It's defined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development as a homeless individual with a disability who currently lives in a place not meant for human habitation, and that has been homeless, for at least 12 months. And this is a requirement to live at Studios of Montero. The individual's disability can be physical, mental, developmental. They just must be verified by a medical provider. As far as criminal backgrounds go, applicants who've been convicted of a violent crime or who are a registered sex offender will in general not be considered for studios in Montero. That decision is largely up to the Sonoma County Housing Authority, who will run the background checks on all the same applicants because of the project-based housing voucher that comes with the studio unit. And now I'll explain just a little about that. You may have heard of housing choice vouchers, which clients can apply towards any rental unit on the market in the county. But these project-based housing vouchers are specifically assigned to the units at studios in Montero. This is how the rent can be subsidized for the tenants. And the really awesome part about this arrangement is that once the tenant lives at studios in Montero for 1 year, they have the option to apply for a housing choice voucher, so essentially they can graduate from supportive housing if they're ready and get a voucher with which they can search the county for permanent independent housing. So that's an exciting feature of this project. Next slide, please. And here is a quote from a young lady who's applying to be a Studios at Montero tenant. It's just an example of the impact this is going to have on the individuals that are coming to this this development. Some have been homeless for 20 years. Others may have been struggling with homelessness for the past year. But no matter what their situation looks like, the general idea is that most of them didn't know how to exit homelessness and weren't hopeful that housing would ever be affordable and available to them. So like it says here, Studios in Montero is like a game changer for a lot of folks. Next slide. So just really briefly, I'm going to explain the Housing First model. This is an approach to serving people experiencing homelessness that recognizes a homeless person must first be able to access a decent, safe, and permanent place to live before receiving wraparound services that'll stabilize their health, reduce harmful behaviors such as substance abuse, or increase income. The Housing First model is widely used and regarded as kind of the gold standard in ending homelessness, and it's the approach that we follow at the Studios at Montero. Next slide. So that is, this is certainly not to downplay the importance of, substance abuse and mental health treatment. Many of, our unsheltered population can really benefit from this sort of treatment. So this is why, COTS is really focusing on providing a robust supportive services program to the Studios at Montero tenants. We want to, improve the quality of their lives, help them reach their personal goals, and, most importantly, keep them stably housed, right? So there's the three-part model here. First and foremost, tenants will be given a case manager with whom they can meet regularly on site. They'll be available 7 days a week. The purpose of case management is to keep the tenant engaged with services, whether it be helping them apply for Social Security benefits or employment, or connecting them to resources, as mentioned, like mental health or substance abuse treatment. Excuse me. And if a tenant's housing is in jeopardy because of behavioral issues like aggression or issues with neighbors, or maybe it's a health and safety issue such as hoarding or smoking in their room or something like that, that's when the case manager steps in and really works with the tenant, trying to remedy those issues to make sure that maybe we can avoid getting a lease violation, or at worst get evicted. So in my experience with permanent supportive housing, there's usually a reason behind these behaviors, right? Like the tenants aren't just doing these things to be disruptive or difficult. So it's really the case manager's job to build the relationship with the tenants and hopefully figure out how to correct these behaviors and why they're happening. Next is assistance with healthcare coordination. It's such a big part of a PSH case manager's workload. Everyone in SAM has some sort of disability or health condition, and the chances of the individual wasn't able to adequately manage their health conditions while living on the street. So there's a lot to do, from arranging medical transport to making appointments, setting them up with a healthcare provider, et cetera. Just really the better managed their healthcare is, the more likely they are to be safe and to be successful at maintaining their housing. And last but not least, community. Just a person needs a sense of belonging and purpose in their community, to truly, thrive. So to just kind of generate, this vibe, Sam will have on-site social supports manager that will be leading life skill groups in the community room. We're hoping to get some planter boxes so tenants can garden and take pride in how their community looks. Tenants will also have the option to take on a leadership role. We're calling this program the SAM Squad, and it's an opportunity to be a volunteer peer mentor to their neighbors. And we're also planning on, hopefully having like a van to take tenants on day outings to community events, as well as to COTS Mary Isaac Center, so they can join the evening recovery group. So, there's a lot that we have on the plate, for Studios in Montero. It's really about creating a community, at SAM, as well as integrating the tenants into the Petaluma community overall. And next slide, please. So just a few notes on metrics and outcomes. We will be tracking the success of this program. We'll be looking at the demographics of the tenants we serve, as well as housing retention rates, how well the tenants engage in services. All this data will be reported to the city, county, and state as part of the home key agreement. I also want to make note that this program's design and the supportive services were developed from industry best practices. COTS and Burbank have consulted other PSH providers, listened to what has worked and what hasn't, and also have listened to people with lived experience with homelessness to get their thoughts on how to create a home that is made for them and somewhere they're likely to stay. And last but not least, experts. We have so many amazing. There's such an amazing collaborative effort to end homelessness in our community, not only between COTS and Burbank Housing, but the City of Petaluma as well. So on that note, I'd like to hand it over to Jameson Bunn from the City of Petaluma. Hi, Jameson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jameson Bunn. I am the Communications Program Manager for the City of Petaluma, but I'm relatively new in my role. I've been here for about 3 weeks, and prior to that, I was working at COTS. I was the Director of Development and Communications there. So I kind of have a background in homeless services and have worked with a lot of colleagues at COTS for about 4 years before I joined the city. So it's actually really nice to see everyone again and to be able to talk about this project, which I was able to see from the background as it was developing. So here at the city, what we were primarily focused on was supporting this project. Could you switch to the next slide, I think? Oh, no, this one's good. So the city is providing funding for this and letting the experts take the lead in providing the services, and of course letting Burbank do what they do best, which is developing the property. But we can provide funding through Project Home Key. For anyone who doesn't know what Project Home Key is, it was a state initiative to provide funding specifically to increase our housing stock. So communities could apply for this funding, whether that was to transition a hotel into permanent housing, single-family homes, multifamily apartments, adult residential facilities, manufactured housing, or to take existing commercial facilities and renovate them so that they could serve as housing. The Housing First mandate says that you want to make sure that somebody is housed, and then they can focus on getting sober, getting a job. Trying to become sober on the streets is not really possible for folks. So housing and getting all of that in place is a real priority for the state. So Petaluma was able to apply for these funds for this specific project. We are in the process of writing a strategic plan to end homelessness through Petaluma. And COTS and several of our other nonprofits have been a really major part of that. We see the next slide. Thank you. Oh, there we go. So as part of our strategic plan to end homelessness, and this was authored by Andrew Henning, who's a consultant who's worked with a lot of cities in the North Bay on the issue of homelessness. So he's got a lot of expertise, but he really went in and assessed the situation around homelessness and tried to figure out what is what's going on, who are the people who are experiencing homelessness in our community, and what is it that they need, because that's the only way we're actually going to get people into housing, is to take their experience and their feedback and make that a part of the plan. And what was the major finding from that strategic plan was that there are about 120 to 150 people in Petaluma who have experienced chronic homelessness, which means, a decade or more. And those were the ones who were most resistant to accessing services, as Julia kind of mentioned before. So we're trying to find projects that we can help fund that might be run by experts like those at COTS, to serve this particular population. And if we can make a dent there, and solve the really entrenched problem with people who have been experiencing homelessness for a really long time, we can also make a dent in homelessness in the other avenues where people's needs aren't quite so high and folks aren't quite as vulnerable. So we've done this through a couple of projects through COTS. People's Village was the first one, and that is transitional housing for shelter and housing for 25 people. That's not permanent housing, but it's almost like a little tiny home on the COTS campus, and you may be familiar with that already, but it's kind of the first step. And that's designed to help get some folks who have been chronically homeless for a long time just into shelter, because as Julia mentioned, sometimes they're really resistant even to coming inside, but this presents a different option for them. And Studios at Montero is the follow-up to that. So we see this as permanent supportive housing is really the answer to homelessness in our community. So being able to support this project helps us to decrease homelessness on a much larger scale than we've been able to do before with a significant number of housing units. The next round of funding for Project Homekey is coming up in the spring of 2023. We don't have any projects that we're identifying yet or going public with. But one thing that's a major part of Project Homekey is the potential landlords or folks who would sell to the city or to the state through Project Homekey must be willing participants. We're not, eminent domaining anything in order to make this work. So this is just a small call out. If you know of anyone with a multi-unit building, the City of Petaluma is always looking for new projects to apply for funding. Could you do the next slide quickly? Yeah, and so this is just an illustration of some of the ideas that the strategic plan to end homelessness have gathered. The city website has what we're calling the pathways to housing. So folks on our end have worked with our nonprofit partners to develop this, what we're calling pathways to housing, but it's really just a conception of how we can help people along the pathway from chronic homelessness or short-term homelessness to permanent housing that's going to last. You can learn a little bit more about our plan and what we're doing to help support our nonprofit partners at our website. And let's see, I think the link may not be on this page, but it's just cityofpetaluma.org/pathways to housing. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do or in offering feedback, there's a form there where you can offer feedback to, what we're doing or what you'd like to be seeing more of. We would love to hear from you. And we're just really excited to be able to support a project like Studios at Montero. It's going to make a big difference for folks. So thanks to Mark and to Julia and to Ashlyn for all the amazing work you're doing. Great.
All right, thank you everyone for that presentation. My name is Erin Kruger. I work at COTS, and I'm going to go ahead and have Mark facilitate our Q&A. Mark, we have some questions in the chat. If you wouldn't mind checking those out first, and once we go through those, then we'll open it up to questions that other people might want to add or might want to ask.
All right, thank you, Erin. I answered a few of the questions in the chat, but I'll just kind of highlight what's been asked. Question whether there's elevators, and no, there aren't, but there are 3 units of the 60 that are ADA accessible, wheelchair accessible. At least one of them has a roll-in shower also. So we can accommodate people in wheelchairs easily, but they're not elevators. what else? Let's see. Someone asked about whether there's a sound wall, and the answer is yes. We're putting up a wooden sound wall. I want to say it's 6 or 8 feet. I forgot the details, but there is a wooden sound wall on the property between the building and Highway 101 to mitigate sound. But it's not a big monstrosity, not a big brick, kind of wall that you'd see right along the highway. It's further in and close to the building, but it will suppress the sound. And we're also changing out a lot of the windows on the noisy side of the property, if you will, with windows that have a very high sound barrier rating. So the sound inside the building will be, and actually outside the building, because the sound wall will be quite minimal. So I'll end there, see if there's any people want to raise their hand, or if there's any other questions that I'm missing, someone could point that out maybe.
Looks like Michael Reynolds has his hand raised.
Yeah, Michael.
Hey, thank you for the presentation, the information. Great project. We've been following it along. I work for West County Community Services. Question about, you mentioned transitional aged youth, and I might have missed this, but typically that's 16 to 25. So will there be 16 to 18-year-olds there as well, or is it just the adult day?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Michael. I'll take this one. Yeah, so the transitional, like the tenants at Studios of Montero do have to be adults.
Okay.
So it will be 18 to 24 and a half, I believe, is considered TAU. Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then also, I saw the Housing First, and I had recently from the newsletter from COTS, I saw that there was some shift away from Housing First, but I assume this project is maintaining that model going forward.
Yes, I mean, per the regulations, for this project and a lot of PSH projects like it, we are following the Housing First model, although we are very, very focused on the supportive services and, making sure, we can't, of course, by the Housing First model, we can't require people to participate in services. However, right, we can strongly encourage and, continuously offer them, let the tenants know that they are available. We are just definitely focusing on just creating a really robust supportive services program, and just because we know it's what's required to keep people housed.
Hi, Julia. This is Chuck Fernandez. I'm the CEO of COTS. If I could jump in, Michael, we are not shifting away from Housing First. In fact, we are reinforcing Housing First, even more so by being really housing focused and making sure all of our residents have a housing plan to leave the shelter and get into housing. So we are not shifting away from Housing First.
Also, one thing that
I apologize. I saw an email that seemed to indicate otherwise. I'll have to go back and check that. Sorry for that misunderstanding. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, one thing with Housing First here in Northern California that I noticed when I worked at COTS, and heard this from Stacy Questoni, who manages People's Village, is that, Housing First is a delicate balance. In theory, it works really great, and in other parts of the country, it has shown itself to be a fantastic solution. When we get someone who's really vulnerable into an apartment, what we've noticed, there's no fallback apartment. So if they act in a way that gets them evicted or are unable to keep up with the tenant-landlord relationship, if they get evicted, there's no fallback apartment for them to go into. So Housing First is fantastic when you've got a lot of housing and people can stay housed and then learn to be housed long-term. But if they get into that housing and then they lose it for whatever reason, then they're more likely to fall back into homelessness. So we're just trying to provide people with the resources that are going to keep them housed, the services, the supportive services, like Julia is talking about, that mean when they get into a place, they're able to keep it. So it's Housing First, but it's adapted to the realities of the housing market that our clients are facing.
I see we have another question in the chat from Jerry. Jerry, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask the question?
Yeah, there you go. So this is Jerry Lalonberg. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so couple of different things, and you can catch up with them. One, and it's tied together, is the circumstances under which a history of a violent crime can be waived in this type of permanent supportive housing. I think that's really important to have that conversation. That's one of my comments. The other has to do with the eviction protocols. Are the eviction protocols different in this project than they are under ordinary eviction protocols or under COTS eviction protocols? Would be my second question. And my third point is what I put in the chat, which was at 18.1 million for 60 units, that's 305,000 per unit, which is versus 600,000 for Sonoma County. So I want to very much praise Homekey and Burbank and COTS for bringing this online at about 50% of the ordinary cost, which already had a building. But the other thing that's very odd about it then is that next line, which is that works out to 1473 per square foot, which is significantly higher than the 487 per square foot in the Sonoma County open market. Is Mark or somebody, do you have some explanation about some of those costs and cost differentials, as well as the eviction questions?
Well, I can talk about the cost issues, then I'll defer to somebody else on the eviction and the waivers for violence. It's Jerry, it's a little bit apples and oranges. That we're buying the motel, just to buy the motel and the land underneath it was over $9 million. But the units are so small, 207 square feet, when you do a per square foot analysis, you get those really large numbers just because the space is so small. So the other thing about comparing the pricing is, again, they're really small units. So 300,000 a unit is much lower than new construction, but new construction, we also don't build 200 square foot units. So, it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but it is a lot less money and maybe more importantly, a lot less time to buy a motel building and convert it rather than starting from scratch. So point well taken. But I think the high square foot figure is just an aberration because the units are so small.
And Jerry, I would also like to pipe in from the city that the funding provided from Homekey is not just for the units themselves, but it also accounts for 3 years of operating support. So the staffing and the supportive services are included in that price tag. It's not just the units themselves. So when you're comparing that to an average unit that's up for sale in Sonoma County, that wouldn't include supportive services to help keep that person housed. So that's just part of the cost.
If I may follow up, thank you for excellent answers. One of my transparency arguments forever is to actually give us that detail in the original formats or in the formats. What you just described changes the cost of those units, especially across the multiple years of services. So if you can really show that, what's the building versus what's the service support? And so what does PSH actually cost? And I would, in terms of housing first, posit that COTS and several others are currently actually doing housing first with all of the supportive services. And that is not what we did when we started housing first in this county. Is we did housing first and took down the barriers, but we didn't have the support structure that is the premise of housing first in terms of success. So we're getting there. So I want to point that out as well. Thank you.
And I'll go ahead and answer the eviction protocol question that he had. For just to give an example, if someone in permanent supportive housing were to pay rent late, in ordinary or typical housing, someone would receive a 3-day notice after the 5th of the month if their rent is not paid, to pay in full. With permanent supportive housing, Julia did mention, there is a team of people. So if someone is paying rent late or they're forgetting or, paying the incorrect amount, we would meet as a team to discuss how we can put together a plan to assist that person in ensuring that they fully understand what their rent is and a strategy to help them pay on time, whether that may be a payee or whether it may be, the funds coming directly from their bank account and their bank sending a check to the property. So we would come up with some type of plan for them that one encourages long-term housing, and it kind of shies away from the eviction portion of it.
Julia, are you able to speak to
yeah.
the last question or the last part of Jerry's question?
Yeah, that's right. In regards to criminal history and becoming a tenant, so the studios in Montero itself isn't going to be doing background checks, to determine the person's eligibility. However, the Sonoma County Housing Authority is, because they're getting a project-based housing voucher with the tenancy. So I don't believe it's a I believe there are situations where someone is a registered sex offender or has a history of violent crime. There can be some discussion, but I think overall, that we are not going to be accepting tenants with those sort of criminal backgrounds.
Andrea, you have your hand up if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, how's the audio? Good.
Fine. Yeah.
Great. Excuse me in advance if my little one decides that he has something to say. Mostly demands, no questions. Anyway, I wanted to just voice my support for the project. I definitely have been looking forward to this meeting for some time to say hello to my former COTS colleagues. Hi, everyone, you're doing awesome. And I work at a domestic violence services agency now. All that we have in terms of emergency shelter is a 32-bed for victims of domestic violence. And it's not all that we have, it's a pretty big deal. But when they leave that emergency shelter, which is very different from supportive housing, it's hard to find somewhere to go sometimes. It's hard to get plugged in, especially when your whole life is in an uproar, just like COTS clients, many of them. So I think this is a very good thing for the entire county. And I think that it's going to end up being a model for other homeless services agencies. I can already see that happening in terms of the responses to these very complicated questions. And I'm looking forward to being able to tell our clients that there's another place for them potentially. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right page here of what the kind of support that you're providing, that maybe we could at YWCA provide you as a reference for these women and sometimes children. I guess that is kind of a question. So, is eligibility kind of on a case-by-case basis? And I'm sorry, I missed the first part. I was trying to get him to settle down, but how are you determining, I think that's been a lot of the questions, like how do you know who's a good fit and who's not? Because it's just very hard to tell when someone's in crisis, how they will handle that kind of environment.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. Yeah. So, the clients are referred by coordinated entry. So it's about, taking the person as they are, meeting them where they are and trying to figure out how to make it work with studios at Montero. It's, what supportive services they're going to need to be successful. As far as you mentioned mother and child, yes, so we are going to allow families, although it's designed to be single occupancy units. Families can be one parent with one minor child, just because that's all the space that the room allows for, really. I'm sorry, I hope that answered your question.
Sorry, yes, it does answer my question, and that's wonderful. Just, one woman and child makes a huge difference. There's so many people that need housing right now. So thank you very much, Julia.
All right. I see a question from David Coe, or also known as Santa Claus, it looks like. So, David, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you. Just wondering if you've identified volunteer opportunities for regular resident folk like me.
Boy, I love this question. Yes, we're certainly going to need the community's help. Although we haven't identified particular volunteer roles yet, we're we're still in construction and, still putting the program together. We are absolutely taking, if you have any interest in helping out, we would love your support. Certainly, and I know Aaron's going to speak more about this in a few minutes, but we are certainly going to be needing help with, donations for the tenants, who are moving into their first place in a long time, and stuff like that. So we'll definitely keep you posted on that. And thank you for asking.
Sure. One other quick thing, suggest that you post your slideshow to the web somewhere, maybe to the Petaluma site.
Yes, this will go out this video will go out to a community-wide email. It'll also be available on our website. So you can share with your friends and the rest of the community.
Thank you, David. I don't see any other hands up, but I could be missing somebody. Any final questions? Any final comments from COTS or Burbank Housing or the City of Petaluma? Okay, I feel like it's, oh, go ahead, Jerry. Sorry.
Well, the one question we got missed was, were there any unusual repercussions of buying a 50-year-old building as you're going through the renovation process?
No, I mean, at this point, the construction's 2 months into it, so most of the demo's been done. So if there was going to be some horrible surprises in the walls, we would have found them by now, but that has not happened. I can't rule out surprises later on, but it's unlikely at this point. The building's pretty good shape.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I feel like unless someone wants the last word, that we have a wrap.
Yeah, I just want to end with one thing. You can learn more about Studios at Montero at our website, and this video will be online. You can share the project with our community. We will be looking, as Julia mentioned, for support in terms of supplying items for our clients as they moved in. So be on the lookout for that. And we would just love it if you could support COTS. Your gifts make this and other innovative projects possible. And we're so grateful for the support of our community and all that you do. Really just blown away by this support today. It means a lot. So I'm going to end it with just if you have additional questions about the project, you can reach Julia at studios@monterocots.org. And then here are some other websites that you may want to check out for these related to these projects. And I think that's all for us today. Anything else, Mark?
No, thank you for the wrap up, Aaron. That was very nice. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope you all have a wonderful day and a happy holidays.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.